She wasn't the target. She wasn't even supposed to be home. But by 3:00 p.m., Hannah Choi lay dead in the back room of her flower shop, killed by a cup of tea she never ordered. In the town of Fairview, where neighbors left their doors unlocked and strangers waved in the street, her murder wasn't just a crime. It was a shattering of trust. And the most chilling part, the poison in that cup was meant for someone else. Hannah Choi died from a cup of tea she never ordered. The town of Fairview, population just under 9,000, wasn't the kind of place where people locked their doors. It was the kind of place where you waved to the same mailman for 12 years, where your kids rode their bikes to school, and where the air often smelled faintly of freshly cut grass and coffee from the corner cafe. For most of her 36 years, Hannah Choi had called this town home. Hannah was the heart of Fairview's main street. Her flower shop, Lavender and Lace, sat between the old bookshop and a bakery. She was known not just for her bright arrangements, but for the sprig of lavender she always tucked behind her ear. A personal touch, a signature. If you walked in on a Tuesday, you'd find her with her sleeves rolled up, arranging bouquets while humming quietly to herself. There was something about her that made people want to linger. Maybe it was her warm laugh. Maybe it was how she remembered everyone's birthday, even their pets. Or maybe it was that she carried the kind of kindness that made strangers feel like old friends. Every Sunday morning, she would take leftover flowers from Saturday's orders and arrange them into small bouquets for the retirement home down the street. She never told anyone, but the residents always knew who they came from. In the shop's back room, where Hannah took her thinking breaks, there was an old chipped white teacup on the shelf. The cup had been with her since college. A little battered, but still her favorite. On the morning of May 20, 2022, that teacup sat quietly in its usual place. It was shaping up to be an ordinary Friday. The kind where time passes in petals and polite conversation. Hannah opened the shop early to finish a wedding order, 6 centerpieces and a bridal bouquet of peonies and baby's breath. At around 10:15 a.m., the delivery man arrived with a small brown box of artisanal tea. The label read to Miss C.L. The name didn't ring a bell, but the handwriting was precise, almost formal. Since Fairview was the kind of town where packages were often left at nearby businesses for pickup, Hannah set it on the back counter, thinking someone would stop by for it later. The day carried on as usual. A regular came in for tulips and stayed to talk about the upcoming summer fair. Hannah rang her up, wrapped the bouquet in brown paper, and tucked in a little sprig of lavender for free. At 20:15 p.m., Hannah's assistant, Emily, left for her lunch break. Hannah stayed behind to finish the wedding arrangements. By 3:00 p.m., she was dead. Later, police would note a crushed lavender stem found near the backroom door. A detail that didn't seem important at the time. But it was. When Emily returned at 3:05 p.m., she found Hannah slumped over the work table. The chipped white teacup sat beside her, steam still curling from its surface. The tea inside would later test positive for oleander, a plant toxic enough to stop a heart in minutes. Detective Robert Klein stood in the back room, looking down at Hannah's still form. "We assumed it was a robbery," he later recalled. "We were wrong." The cash register was untouched. The wedding order sat exactly as Hannah had left it. There were no signs of forced entry. The only lead was the delivery man, a guy who'd worked the Fairview route for years. He remembered dropping off the tea, but couldn't recall exactly who had been outside when he arrived. The first time police asked, he said there was a green sedan parked behind the shop. The second time, he swore it was dark blue. That inconsistency put investigators on edge. They interviewed known petty criminals in the area, but none had any link to Hannah. No history, no motive. Then, while combing through Hannah's business accounts, a junior detective stumbled upon something odd, a 1-star Etsy review posted to her shop's profile just 3 days earlier. The comment read, "Tea was bitter. Never ordering again." Hannah didn't sell tea. It was an odd detail, easy to dismiss. But it wasn't going to be. The next break came from a cafe security camera across the street. The footage showed 2 cars swapping parking spots behind the flower shop in under 2 minutes. In that gap, someone slipped through the back entrance. The tea shipment's intended recipient, Carla Lewis, lived only 2 streets away. She owned a boutique that had been locked in a bitter business rivalry with another local shop owner for years. When detectives traced the tea's order, they found it had been purchased through an anonymous online account. No billing name, prepaid card. But the delivery address had been typed manually, not selected from a drop-down menu. That suggested someone could have intentionally altered it. Then came the overlooked detail. The shop's backroom door latch had been faulty for months. Anyone could push it open with a little force. When detectives opened the evidence bag containing the chipped teacup for testing, the lab room went silent. And for 5 full seconds, the soundtrack drops to absolute stillness. The prime suspect emerged quickly: Mark Jensen, cousin of Carla Lewis's rival. Jensen claimed he'd been hiking in a neighboring county that afternoon. But when police pulled his Fitbit data, the story cracked. The tracker stopped recording at 2:52 p.m. right when it connected to the flower shop's nearest cell tower. Detectives confronted him with the data. Jensen shrugged and said, "Batteries die. That's not a crime." But Jensen had a motive. Carla Lewis had allegedly sabotaged his cousin's shop in a way that cost thousands. He admitted he'd bought some tea, but insisted it was for Carla, not Hannah. His smirk during interrogation would later become infamous in Fairview. Toxicology confirmed the presence of oleander, traced to plants growing in Jensen's backyard. The forensic botany report was clear. The leaf fragments matched perfectly. Jensen finally admitted he'd prepared the tea and delivered it to the shop, expecting Emily, Hannah's assistant, to hand it to Carla when she came in later. But due to the courier's earlier misdelivery and the unlocked door, Hannah herself made the tea. The timeline reconstruction showed Jensen entering through the faulty back latch, placing the tea in Hannah's chipped cup, and slipping out. He had meant to poison Carla. Hannah was collateral damage. The trial lasted just under 3 weeks. Jensen was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 30 years. Hannah's sister, Grace, started a nonprofit called Lavender Shield, aimed at improving safety protocols in small businesses. She spoke at schools, held community workshops, and distributed safety kits to shop owners across the state. Every May 20, locals leave sprigs of lavender on the doorstep of Lavender and Lace. They say it's not just for Hannah. It's for the kindness she carried, the trust she gave freely, and the life she lived before a single cup of tea changed everything. The full interrogation tapes drop next Tuesday. Hit notify. The man who brewed that poisoned tea is serving life without parole. Carla Lewis, the real target, left Fairview, saying she'll never walk those streets again. And Hannah's sister, Grace, has turned grief into armor, founding Lavender Shield, a nonprofit that teaches women self-defense and situational awareness. Every spring, neighbors lay fresh lavender outside Hannah's flower shop. The chipped teacup that once held death now sits locked in an evidence room. A silent reminder of how a single mistake can steal a life. The question I can't stop asking is this: if the tea had reached its intended victim, would anyone have ever found out who poisoned it? Or would Fairview still believe it was safe? The full uncut interrogation tapes, including the moment the suspect slips up, drop next Tuesday. Hit notify, and tell me in the comments, would YOU have spotted the lie?